Have you been to a National Jamboree? Let's talk about it. Hey, ScouterStan. Want to talk a little bit about the National Jamborees. Now, we have National Jamborees, and they really started back on the 25th anniversary of Scouting in 1935. That was the first planned and organized National Jamboree on the 25th anniversary of Scouting in the United States. Unfortunately, they had a pandemic. Does that sound familiar? They had a pandemic in 1935 of polio, and it completely postponed the Jamboree. They didn't have that 25th anniversary Jamboree until 1937. Now, in case you're not familiar with or have never seen before these patches, I have them in my collection. Now, I have these in oxygen barrier plastic, and I really don't have my museum gloves, so I really am not going to take them out of the case. I'll put some scans up on the screen, and you can actually see them in detail. But this is a 1935 set that I have. Unfortunately, I get a little glare there, but that's the 35 set I have. I have a mint conditioned blue and red. I believe it was the blue one was for the leaders and the red ones were for the youth. And I have a 1935 patch here that actually has, it's in mint condition. So I don't like taking it out because I don't want to mess with it. I don't want to get any oils or anything on it. So I want to keep it as pristine as possible. But that was a 1935, which never actually happened because of the pandemic. 1937 was the first one, and they changed the design a little bit. I still have a 1937 mint that I want to keep nice. These are oxygen barrier bags, and it keeps it nice and flexible. And I have a blue and red neckerchiefs. Now these are full square, so they're a little thicker. They're this full square piece of material that's folded on the bias and then rolled over, of course. So that's the 1937 Jamboree. Now, the 1937 Jamboree, this was in the National Mall. In 1937, that was the first Jamboree they had in the United States. Now, like I said, it was in the National Mall in Washington, D.C., and there was about 27,000 scouts that were there, leaders and youth. And it was a wonderful time. And unfortunately, that was the last Jamboree we had for a while. We didn't have another Jamboree until after World War II. Okay, so that was something that, the scouts were busy with their activities supporting the war effort. So it was a little bit different in that time. Until 1950, when we had our second National Jamboree. Now, this was at Valley Forge, where they had the Next Jamboree, and they had over 47,000 scouts and scouters show up for that particular one. Now, in this particular collection, I have several other patches. I have the back patch, which is a fully embroidered back patch or an enlargement. I had the participation patches. I have a yellow one. I have the silk scarf, and I have the cotton scarf, which was standard issue, and of course the regular patch for the second Jamboree. Again, this is in an oxygen barrier packaging to keep it nice and fresh. And I'll put images up so that you can actually see the different images. Go ahead, hit Control P, and that pauses the video. So that's fine with me. You can study all these things. You can get more information online. The next Jamboree they had was in 1953, and it was at Irvine Ranch in California. They had over 45,000 scouts and scouters show up for that one. And it was kind of a Western theme, of course, and it had the patch, had a Conestoga wagon on it. Of course, they had the neckerchief and all the different patches from that time. So that was a huge Jamboree. Now in 1957, they had the next Jamboree back at Valley Forge. Now you kind of see a theme here. They would go to the East Coast to the West Coast and back and forth. that was very popular, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But in 57, they actually introduced the very first backpack patch, which was actually not a patch. It was actually a leather patch, or a leather stamped thing that actually went into on the backpack. So if you were backpacking in, the neckerchief, and of course the big patch for your jacket, and of course they had the regular patch for the event. So that was another thing. They went back to Valley Forge for the 57 Jamboree. And in 1957, they had 52,000 scouts and scouters show up for that Jamboree at Valley Forge. In 1960, they went back out west. And when they did that, that was to celebrate the 50th anniversary of American Scouting. In that, it was a gold theme. And their neckerchief and all of the different patches. They, of course, had the back patch, or the backpack patch. I can never say it right. But it was leather, it was stamped leather that they were doing. And of course the rest of it was a cotton. They introduced a really interesting thing which they carried over for all the jamborees since then, but it was some kind of a game or a way of unifying scouts, and that was all a part of the whole process. And again, like I said, it was out west. To be exact, it was in Colorado Springs in Colorado, and they had about 56,000 scouts and scouters. Now in 1964 they went back out east. Okay, so they of course went out east, and they had different patches for different things. If you were joining in as a leader, they gave you this nice silk one. They have a silk patch. They have an embroidered patch. They have the stamped leather patch, the back for the jacket pack, and of course the scarf for that particular one. So they had many different things. It seems like they kept going up and up, and this was at Valley Forge in Pennsylvania. 51,000 scouts and scouters were at that one. Now in 1969 they had another National Jamboree, and of course it was out west. This was at Farragut State Park in Idaho, and it had one of the prettiest sets that I think was out there. It had this beautiful all natural patch. As you can see here, this is my set. They had a small and a large backpack patch, and of course then they had the regular patch, and they had a join in or a souvenir one. They had different kinds of patches and stuff, and they came up with different sets. So this was a very popular one to collect. Now, unfortunately, this only had about 34,000 scouts and scouters that were in attendance. And a lot of changes were being made because they wanted more participation. It was difficult to get the West Coast to go to the East Coast and the East Coast to go to the West. It was difficult. So in 1973, they had an East and a West. They had two at the same time. This was the 1973. As you can see here, they had an East and a West patch. They had this big square patch. It was very innovative for the time in the 70s. Of course, the leather patch and the big jacket patch, and of course the neckerchief. So this is a whole set. And my brother and I were in Ohio at the time. So they sent him, took the western trek. They took him back to Farragut State Park for the West 1973 National Jamboree. The East enjoyed Moraine State Park in Pennsylvania. Now, when you combine the numbers for both of them, it was a total of 73.6 thousand scouts that were participating in the dual 1973 National Jamboree. The West and, of course, the East. You had those two going on. That was awesome. It was great participation. In 1977, they went back to having it on the East Coast, and they had it in Moraine State Park, just like they did in 73. They did not have it out west. They just had it at Moraine State Park, and that was in 1977. That was the Jamboree I went to. And we were living in Ohio, or no, we were living in Massachusetts at that time. And I went all the way out there with this group. And it was a lot of fun in '77. They had a lot of different patches. They had the different staff patches, and the participation patch carried it forward, as you can see in some of these pictures. These airtight containers are great because they're flexible, they don't break, and you can see all the different patches. So that's the neat thing about the '77 Jamboree. Now, the one thing that was kind of different about it, it became less populated as far as scouts participating. Only about 28.6 thousand scouts and scouters were involved in the 1977 Jamboree. And I can tell you some stories about that Jamboree. I was there, so keep that in mind. In 1981, they went back to AP Hill. It was an East Coast. They kept it on the East Coast. And when in '81 they went to the AP Hill, and they had the little silhouette of the scout, and of course George Washington and all that was on their scarf, and of course their the leather patch, and they had the different patches that were part of that contingent, and that was kind of it as far as East Coast, West Coast. And that was kind of the interesting thing. They had it there for the next 7 Jamborees. That would be 1985, 1989, 1997, 2001, and 2010. And that was all at AP Hill in Virginia. Since the 100th anniversary in 2010 of Scouting in the United States, that was the 100th year. From that year on, they've had it at their own scout reservation. That would be the Summit in West Virginia. That is the official National Jamboree location for the nation. Now, this is interesting. The 1935 Jamboree was postponed until 1937. Recently, we've had another pandemic, so that has caused a postponement until the next Jamboree. The next Jamboree is scheduled right now for July of 2023. And you can go to the link that's below this on the video and sign up for their newsletter. So they are getting it going again. So definitely take advantage of that and get involved. Scouting's meant to be fun, and collecting different patches and doing different things is very important. Now, the Scout dad joke, I guess we call it, that's been reviewed, and we are continuing with those jokes. Do you know how to fix a pumpkin? Simple. Use a pumpkin patch. And of course, if you have patches that you've collected, please bring them to the unit meeting. You can definitely show these to scouts and tell them about your stories of how you collected them or where you were when this was going on. I mean, there's a lot of different things you can do to promote scouting. And I know you do a lot of hard work for scouts. So keep that up, and I will see you on the trail.